What is going on, guys? My name is Jared and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we are going to dive back into the transom assembly and work on getting it completely taken apart the rest of the way so I can do the final bit of cleaning and get this thing prepped for kind of rebuilding everything. So basically at this point, I just need to get the steering pin out, the lower pin, and then 4 of the studs on the back I'm going to be replacing because they were pretty rusty. And at that point, I'll have this thing completely apart, the gimbal ring will be off, and I can have full access to get the last little bit of corrosion kind of handled and get this thing prepped for cleaning up a little bit more, painting, and then reassembly. In addition to this bad boy, I have been spending some time down in the basement working on some upholstery. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to show a lot of details on that unless you guys want to see that. So don't forget to let me know down below if you'd be more interested in seeing any of the upholstery stuff. I'm not an expert. This is kind of the second time I've done this. So I don't want to go into too much detail because I might not be doing it right. Again, if you want to see it, let me know down below, but otherwise, let's get into this thing. Back in 2017, I began a full restoration of my 96 Bayliner by tearing it apart all the way down to the hull. From there, I began the rebuilding process, which included learning to fiberglass, rebuilding an engine and outdrive, learning to fair and paint, and even upholstery. Now, I've bought a 28-foot cabin cruiser, and I'm starting all over. Welcome, my name's Jared. Now get ready, because it's going to be a ship show. Alright, well, without further ado, let's get into this thing. So as I mentioned previously, I need to get this lower pin out and the steering pin up here. So before I can get that one, I got to get this one out because a slide hammer has to go through here. So first thing we need to do is remove this cotter pin. I actually already went ahead and straightened out the tip of it and started to get it moving out here. So let me get the camera set up here and see if we can get that done. Okay, so in order to do this, there's actually, you might look at this and be like, well, that's impossible. There's nowhere for the pin to go. But there's actually a hole on either side down here so the pin can go in from either way. But in order to get that to line up, we got to move the gimbal ring like that. And then this pin will actually line up with this hole down here. There we go. Now obviously we'll replace that. Okay, let's straighten this back out. Okay, now I got my dead blow hammer and a piece of brass pipe to try and drive out this pin. I don't think it should be too difficult. It's moving pretty easy. That's the lower pin out. Now, with that guy out, what we need to do is get a slide hammer and we're going to feed it up through the hole we just got that pin out of, up through here, actually thread it into the bottom of the steering pin. But before we do that, we need to actually loosen the steering pin by removing these 2 nuts. Now you don't need to completely remove them, but I'm replacing the U-bolt anyway. So I'm going to remove those 2 nuts, and then on the back side we're going to flip this over and we'll remove the actual nut that screws down from the top. Okay, that is the 2 nuts for the U-bolt and the plate. So now we're going to flip this thing over. This right here is the money shot as to why I'm doing this. So this steering pin honestly doesn't look all that bad, but this is as easy as this is ever going to get. The other option is, if this is on the boat, you have to drill out holes either on the sides with the Mercruiser kit, or I believe Hardened Marine or somebody else makes a kit that you actually cut a giant hole out of the front of the transom assembly, and then you'll screw in a cover plate afterwards that you got to seal up. But that's another point that water could potentially leak, and I don't love it, so that's why we're doing it. Now, I assume this is extremely tight, so I'm not sure how I'm going to go about fixturing this thing to keep it from moving, but anyway, this is a 1 1/16 nut. Yeah, that's not gonna, so I might throw this guy on the ground real quick. Let's see what happens here. Oh, that actually wasn't all that tight. All right, well, for that matter, let's go back on the bench. Okay, so at this point, the nut is actually hitting the top side, so it kind of wants the pin to go down. Now, it's not going to go the whole way, but it's not going to move at all until we loosen this pinch bolt. So this pinch bolt actually is what squeezes the steering arm on the pin. So unless we loosen that, this thing's not going to move. So let's do that real quick. Okay, I'm going to leave that there for now. It doesn't need to come off the whole way. It just needs to be loose. You can actually see the steering arm's loose now. Alright, so what I think is happening is the whole gimbal ring is currently moving down. And it's starting to jam up down here. So I think I'm going to take that as a clue and see if I can't start using the slide hammer. So what I did is actually I rented the slide hammer from the auto parts store, and by the grace of God, it actually comes with the threaded adapter that actually threads perfectly into the bottom of the steering pin. Now, depending on the condition of yours, this might not be as easy as this is going. Mine didn't go in that easily initially. I had to take a tap and kind of chase the threads, but they're not so far gone that I can't thread this in. So I'm going to take that as a win and try and cinch this up tight. Now the other kind of downside here that I'm not sure how it's going to go is the slide hammer itself is long enough to go through here and thread in, but it only leaves me a very small amount of room to actually operate the slide hammer. Let me show you what I mean. So here's the slide hammer. I'm going to thread this through the bottom, and it's going to thread into this adapter. Now normally you'd want to probably thread this in as far as it goes, but I'm kind of operating with limited stroke here, so actually that's as far as it goes anyway. So as you can see, this is kind of all the movement I can get, so I'm sort of limited in those regards, but we're going to give this a shot. I'm going to back you up in case things go flying. Alright, I'm going to put on some earmuffs. This is probably not going to be quiet. Okay, so it is moving, which is an awesome sign. Now, it seems like it kind of stopped there, so I'm going to spin this around. I may need to loosen that nut a little bit more. Yep, that's exactly what's going on. So until this thread or nut completely comes off the thread, I'm probably going to have to do this in a couple of stages. I'm not sure how long this thread actually is. Oh, that might be it there. Here it comes. Okay, let's bring you over here, see what's going on. Okay, so that fortunately went pretty well. Get that out of the way so we can knock this U-bolt out. All right, so I think I kind of figured out the secret to this. First of all, you need something with a little bit more impact to it, so went with a real hammer. And the key here is, what I discovered is you want to put the steering pin back in, because with this slit in the aluminum, I think a lot of that energy is being dissipated when you hit it because it's actually kind of closing up. So I put the steering pin back in, and it immediately started coming out. So I think that's the secret to the job. Alright, so just to give you a frame of reference of what we're looking at here, I got the gimbal ring upside down on the bench with a couple blocks of wood sort of clamping it just to hold it in place, because the next step is to remove this bushing right here, which we need to hammer out. It's really no special tool, just says to use a punch or a mandrel. I'm going to see if I can find a socket that's about the right size. Alright, well, had to resort to the brute force method, but once I did that, it worked out pretty well. So this is actually, I didn't realize this isn't metal. This is a, looks like a fiber-filled plastic, fiber-reinforced plastic, something like that. So, isn't there pretty good though? It doesn't look like there's any adhesive on it. It might just be, who knows? Anyway, I cut down both sides. One side I just broke through and kind of just kissed the aluminum. The other side didn't really break through at all. Sorry, puberty. But you can see that one little spot there kind of nicked, but that's not going to be a problem. Okay, so we got that out. Next thing I need to do is get out these 2 bushings for the hinge pins. Can't even see what I'm pointing at. These 2 bushings on the sides for the hinge pins. I actually wasn't going to replace them, but I figured I might as well at this point. There's really no reason not to. They're not that expensive. And they appear to be a similar material to these. I can actually kind of see the fiber in there, so that may even be a sign that they're worn down more than this one was. So let's get those 2 pins out, and then we'll be done with the gimbal housing at this point, other than, I might not even remove these 2. There's nothing wrong with them. The continuity wires, they look to be in good shape, so probably just going to leave them on. All right, had to take a quick break here. Ran out of time yesterday, but let's get back at it. Okay, so we only have a few things left to do on the gimbal housing, which include removing the upper and lower bushings in here and the seal at the bottom. I also have this seal here that I'm going to replace. In addition to that, really the only other thing is I'm going to remove these 4 bottom studs since they're a little bit rusty. They were submerged in water, so I want to get that taken care of. Let's get after these bushings. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is get the seal out, which should just pop right out with a screwdriver. There we go. Okay, so to get that out, let me see if I have a socket that's about the right size. Okay, there's that bushing. One more to go, and this is the tough one, so you can see that it's actually up inside of that hole there, and it's a blind hole, so there's really nowhere to hit it to. Okay, so really the ideal tool for this would be something like this that goes on the end of the slide hammer, but this is way too big to fit down inside of that bore and get behind the bushing and pull it out. I was trying to figure out if there's something I could like easily make that would fit on there, but it's kind of a weird thread, so I'm gonna have to get creative. Alright, well I just continued the brute force method of just kind of pounding it and deforming it, and I think I finally got it here, so let's get in here with some pliers, see if we can't pop it out. There we go. Okay, so again, the right way to do that would be with a slide hammer and a hook thing that kind of goes behind it. I was in the middle of trying to like make one here that fit on the slide hammer. I took a 7/16 nut and ground it down to try and get in behind it, but once I had already deformed it, this wouldn't fit down inside anymore, so that probably would have worked, but it's kind of too late. So anyway, got that out. So both bushings, both seals are out, which is good. So we still got to get this main drive shaft seal out still, which is this big guy here, which has to go from this side, which this shouldn't be too bad. I've actually done this before on my old Alpha drive. There's actually a little slot here I forgot about that actually allows you to kind of get on the back side of that seal, and that worked right away. Okay. Now this seal kind of serves 2 purposes. The main one is keeping grease out of the engine bay from the coupler from kind of flinging back inside. But the other thing this does is it actually seals water out of the U-joint area if you ever get water in the bilge. So a lot of people say this seal is not really important since you're not really sealing water out of the boat, but it is sealing water out of the U-joint bellows. So it is important. I don't know what kind of shape this one was in. It doesn't look that great, so it obviously makes sense to replace it while we have all this apart anyway. Okay, so that is just about everything I can do, with the exception of the last little bit here, which I am nervous about how this is going to go, but that is these 4 studs. So in order to get these out, I'm assuming I'm going to require a little bit of heat. I believe they have Loctite on them. So I need to get 2 of the lock nuts that would normally thread onto these from the inside of the boat on the transom plate, so I can use them as a jam nut and then try and get these studs out. So, see how this goes. Jam nut. Gonna need an open wrench too. Okay. I think that was the ticket. Must just be the Loctite. Alright, I'm going to get these other 4 buzzed off and then we'll come back. You know, I was just about to start recording and let you know that that is every last bit of stuff removed from this transom assembly, or at least this gimbal housing. And then I remembered, we still got one more thing to deal with. This little guy. If you remember watching my first video of removing this from the boat, I snapped just about, I don't know, at least half of these screws for the continuity wires, these little guys. So I need to deal with this by drilling that out and hopefully chasing the same threads. If not, I may have to go up a size. But let's try and get this thing drilled out. So everybody knows drilling stainless sucks, so don't have high expectations for this. Avert your eyes. I know you're not supposed to put a tap in a drill. We've all done it. Alright, well, I suppose you could say I had that one coming after making the comment about not putting a tap in a drill, but it did. So, I did a lot of head scratching and trying to figure out how to get that broken tap out of there, and it just was not happening. I tried all the tricks I could think of. Let me show you what I ended up doing here. Okay, so what I ended up doing was, really just trying to figure out a way to keep rust from happening inside of here, because now I have a piece of steel inside of there. So what I did was, I actually was able to break off a small piece of the tap and get it out, so there was a little bit of depth to the hole. I tried kind of drilling around it, kind of working my way around the threads, trying to break it loose. It just wasn't happening without totally mangling this. So I ended up having a hole that ended up being pretty close to, I think this is 1/8 inch pipe tap, I think. So what I ended up doing is getting a plug and filling the hole with epoxy and then putting the plug in to try and mechanically hold the epoxy as well so it doesn't fall out over time. Then I drilled a new 1024 hole just to the side of that, so I'm just going to bond that wire here now instead of here. My biggest concern was basically just making sure that this got sealed up so that steel inside didn't corrode. So not ideal, but kind of rolling with the punches here, and that's the way it went. Okay guys, at this point, these things need to get cleaned up the rest of the way before I can start the coating process. So I need to go figure out how I'm going to do it. I'm leaning towards just going like glass bead blasting or walnut shell, something like that. That's more aggressive than the baking soda that I have. That obviously didn't remove all the paint. It just kind of cleaned it up. So once I get all the loose paint and corrosion dealt with, the next step is going to be preparing everything for a new coating. Because this thing, I plan on leaving it in the water for the summer. I need to do a bottom paint or anti-fouling paint. So we'll talk about which paint I'm going to use in the future. And in addition to that, I plan on doing a prep coating before the paint on this aluminum that I think is actually pretty interesting. I've seen it done before on like aircraft parts, but not on marine stuff. So I'm curious to see how it goes. It looks like it's pretty simple, but yeah, so stay tuned for that. That being said, that's going to do it for this one, guys. We got the transom assembly completely stripped down and ready for that new coating and then the rebuilding process. I think I have all the parts I need to do that, so we can hopefully get started on that soon. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click that button down below. And if you think this could help anybody else, feel free to share it with them. More people who watch this, the more motivated to do these videos, so every little one helps. All right, see you guys in the next one. Bye.